Picture this: a towering ancient temple, its walls weathered by time, but still unshaken after centuries of violent earthquakes. Nearby, modern buildings lie in ruins, their steel and concrete skeletons shattered by the same tremors. How is it possible that structures built thousands of years ago, without the benefit of seismic studies or computer simulations, could outperform the engineering of today? The answer lies in the forgotten genius of our ancestors, who crafted buildings that danced with the earth rather than fought against it. These master builders didn't just stack stones, they wove resilience into every pillar, every arch, every foundation, using techniques so advanced that modern science is only now beginning to unravel their secrets. What if I told you that some of the most earthquake-proof structures in history were built by civilizations that didn't even understand what caused the ground to shake? From the floating foundations of Japan's pagodas to the interlocking stones of Inca walls, ancient builders developed methods that defied logic until now. These weren't just lucky accidents, they were the result of careful observation, trial and error, and a deep connection to the natural world. Imagine a time when builders didn't have blueprints or load calculations, yet they created monuments that stood the test of time and nature's fury. Their legacy is hidden in plain sight, etched into the very bones of cities that still thrive today. This isn't just a story about architecture, it's about the timeless ingenuity of humanity. Over the next few minutes, we'll journey across continents and centuries to uncover 25 of these astonishing techniques. You'll discover how flexible wooden joints saved Kyoto's temples, why some ancient walls were designed to sway like trees, and how a simple trick with mortar could mean the difference between collapse and survival. These aren't dusty relics of the past, they're lessons waiting to be rediscovered, offering clues that could reshape how we build our future. So let's step into the footsteps of history's unsung engineers and uncover the secrets they left behind, because sometimes the best way forward is to look back. Long before seismographs could measure the Earth's tremors, ancient engineers had already cracked the code of earthquake resistance, not with equations but with their eyes and hands. They watched how willow trees bent in storms instead of snapping, noticed how river reeds swayed with currents without breaking, and saw how loose stones settled into stable positions after landslides. These weren't just passing observations, they became blueprints for survival. In Japan, for instance, builders crafted pagodas with central wooden pillars acting like giant shock absorbers, allowing the structure to sway gracefully during quakes, a technique inspired by the way tall bamboo flexes in the wind. What's truly remarkable is how these intuitive solutions crossed continents and cultures. On the other side of the world, the Inca stonemasons of Peru shaped granite blocks with slight convex surfaces, creating walls where each stone could shift minutely during tremors before settling back into place. They called it living architecture, and it worked so well that many of these walls still stand today, while modern buildings around them have crumbled. This wasn't magic, it was the result of generations paying attention to how unshaped rocks naturally interlock during aftershocks, then replicating that stability in their masonry. Perhaps the most brilliant example of this trial and error wisdom comes from Istanbul's Hagia Sophia. When Byzantine architects rebuilt the massive dome after an earthquake in the 6th century, they didn't just make it thicker, they made it smarter. By adding 40 windows at the base, they created a structure that could breathe during seismic activity, distributing stress like a honeycomb. Later examinations revealed these windows reduced the dome's weight by precisely the amount needed to prevent collapse, a calculation modern engineers confirmed using computer models 1400 years later. The common thread in all these innovations: ancient builders treated earthquakes not as enemies to overpower, but as partners to dance with. In Turkey, they used soft lead plates between stone foundations to let buildings slide harmlessly during tremors. In Kashmir, traditional homes included floating upper stories that moved independently of the base. Even the choice of materials told a story. In Nepal, temples mixed mud mortar with horsehair to create flexible bonds that bent instead of shattered. Every solution reflected a deep understanding that rigidity invites disaster, while adaptability ensures survival. Today's engineers are finally catching up to this ancient wisdom. Research now shows that many of these intuitive techniques align perfectly with modern seismic principles like energy dissipation and base isolation. It turns out our ancestors weren't just guessing, they were pioneering the very concepts that now form the foundation of earthquake engineering. Their legacy challenges us to look beyond textbooks and computer models, reminding us that sometimes the best teacher is 1,000 years of unbroken walls. High above the bustling streets of Kyoto, Japan's ancient pagodas sway like giant metronomes during earthquakes, yet they never topple. The secret lies in their central Shinbashira pillar, a stroke of engineering genius that defies expectations. Unlike modern skyscrapers anchored rigidly to their foundations, these wooden towers have a central column that hangs loosely from the roof structure, stopping just short of touching the ground. When tremors strike, the heavy roof sways first, pulling the pillar like a pendulum while the outer framework moves in opposition. This creates a self-correcting dance where energy dissipates harmlessly through motion, a concept so advanced it took until the 20th century for engineers to replicate it with steel and rubber base isolators. What makes this system truly remarkable is how it mimics nature's wisdom. The pagoda's layered eaves act like the branches of a tree, each level moving independently to distribute force, while the floating pillar functions like a deep taproot stabilizing the whole structure. Master builders refined this technique over centuries, observing how slender pine trees survived typhoons by bending rather than resisting. They even added deliberate imperfections, slightly uneven joints, and loose connections, knowing these flaws allowed the wood to flex and absorb shock without breaking. Modern testing proves these 1,000-year-old pagodas can withstand earthquakes measuring over 7.0 on the Richter scale, outperforming many contemporary buildings in the same seismic zones. But Japan wasn't alone in discovering floating foundations. Across the Pacific, the ancient Moche civilization of Peru built their massive adobe temples atop layers of rounded river stones. When excavated, archaeologists found these stones weren't packed tightly. They rolled slightly during quakes, allowing the entire pyramid to shift as a unit before settling back into place. This simple yet effective system worked so well that Spanish colonists marveled at how these primitive structures survived tremors that toppled their European-style cathedrals. Both cultures arrived at the same solution independently. Structures needed to move with the earth, not against it. The real lesson here isn't just about ancient technology, it's about rethinking our approach to resilience. Today's engineers are now reviving these principles in cutting-edge designs. In Tokyo, a new generation of skyscrapers incorporates tuned mass dampers inspired by the pagoda's pendulum effect, while seismic isolation platforms mimic the Moche's rolling stones. After 1,500 years, the floating foundation has come full circle, proving that sometimes the most futuristic solutions are hidden in plain sight, if we're willing to learn from the past. The Incas constructed walls that defied both time and tectonics, monumental stone puzzles where each piece locked together with such precision that the joints became invisible. But what seems like a quest for perfection was actually a revolutionary approach to earthquake resistance. Their masons carved irregular polygonal blocks with slightly convex surfaces, creating interlocking patterns that allowed the entire wall to flex during tremors. As the ground shook, these stones would shift minutely against each other, redistributing the energy like a wave passing through water. When the earthquake subsided, gravity simply pulled each block back into its original position, a self-healing mechanism modern engineers now call dry stone dynamics. Remarkably, this technique required no mortar at all. The Incas understood that rigid binding materials would crack under stress, so they relied entirely on geometry and friction. Some blocks had as many as 12 carefully angled contact points, ensuring stability from multiple directions. Archaeologists have found these walls still standing after centuries of seismic activity, while nearby Spanish colonial buildings, constructed with advanced European masonry techniques, lie in ruins. The secret wasn't just in the cutting but in the assembly. Builders would test fit each stone repeatedly, adjusting the angles until they achieved what engineers now recognize as kinematic compatibility, a fancy term meaning every piece could move just enough without compromising the whole structure. Even more astonishing, they did it all with bronze tools softer than the granite they shaped. Instead of forcing the stone, Inca masons worked with its natural fracture lines, using hammer stones to patiently peck away surfaces over weeks or months. The result wasn't just functional, it was mathematically elegant. Modern laser scans reveal that the angles between blocks often match optimal seismic dispersion patterns identified by 21st century software. Some walls even incorporate keystone blocks that tighten the entire assembly during tremors, acting like nature's own seismic dampers. Today, researchers are studying these principles to develop new earthquake-resistant materials. A Swiss engineering firm recently created concrete panels with interlocking puzzle piece edges inspired by Inca walls, while Japanese architects are experimenting with 3D printed stone components that mimic Andean polygonal patterns. The irony is profound. Cutting-edge technology now strives to replicate what indigenous builders achieved through observation and craftsmanship. Their legacy whispers an enduring truth. Sometimes resilience isn't about building stronger, but building smarter. Hidden within the sweeping roofs of China's ancient temples lies an engineering masterpiece, the Dougong bracket system, a wooden puzzle that turned rigidity into resilience. Picture hundreds of interlocking timber pieces stacked like children's blocks, each joint precisely carved to allow microscopic movements during earthquakes. These intricate networks didn't just support weight, they transformed destructive energy into graceful motion, letting buildings rock and sway like boats on a choppy sea. The genius was in their flexibility, no nails or glue, just friction and geometry working in harmony. When tremors struck, the Dougong brackets would shift slightly, dispersing force across dozens of contact points until the energy dissipated harmlessly. Some of these structures, like the Yingxian wooden pagoda built in the 11th century, have weathered countless quakes while standing taller than a 20-story modern building. What's astonishing is how these ancient carpenters calibrated their designs. They understood that wood's natural elasticity could be harnessed like a spring, so they deliberately undersized certain joints, creating controlled weak points that would flex before anything cracked. Modern engineers call this hysteretic damping, but the builders of the Tang dynasty didn't need technical terms. They saw how willow branches bent in storms and replicated that principle in timber. The Dougong system's layered design also created redundancy. If one bracket failed, dozens of others would pick up the load, preventing catastrophic collapse. Even the weight distribution was intentional. Heavy tiled roofs actually stabilized the structure by acting like a counterbalance during shaking. The real test came in 2008, when a massive earthquake struck China's Sichuan province. While contemporary buildings crumbled, several historic structures with Dougong brackets survived virtually unscathed. Researchers discovered these ancient frames could absorb up to 40% more seismic energy than modern rigid frames. Today, architects are adapting this wisdom into steel versions of the Dougong system for skyscrapers in earthquake zones, proving that sometimes the best innovation is reinvention. Now, let's sail to the Mediterranean, where an entire city seemed to laugh in the face of seismic disaster. The Romans built their port city of Caesarea on Israel's coast with a shockingly simple secret. They mixed volcanic ash into their underwater concrete. This created a material that not only hardened in seawater but flexed subtly during quakes, allowing piers and breakwaters to survive centuries of tremors that should have shattered them. The Pantheon in Rome used a similar trick, its massive dome lightened with hollow coffers and volcanic aggregate, giving it just enough give to withstand earthquakes that toppled heavier structures. These builders knew what modern science confirms: flexibility isn't weakness, it's the ultimate strength. The Romans built empires and amphitheaters that still stand today, but their most enduring legacy might be hiding in the cracks, literally. When they mixed volcanic ash from Mount Vesuvius with lime and seawater, they accidentally created the world's first self-healing concrete. Unlike modern concrete that weakens as it ages, Roman mortar actually repaired itself when cracks formed. Scientists recently discovered the secret. Rainwater seeping through tiny fissures would react with the volcanic ash, forming new mineral crystals that filled the gaps like nature's own stonemason. This wasn't just durable, it was almost alive, growing stronger with every tremor that should have shattered it. What's truly mind-blowing is how closely this mimics modern bioconcrete, where engineers embed bacteria that produce limestone to seal cracks. The Romans achieved the same result 2,000 years early, simply by observing how volcanic deposits hardened after rain. Their concrete piers in the Mediterranean still endure today, while modern equivalents crumble after decades in saltwater. Recent lab tests at the University of Utah revealed why. The Roman mixture creates a rare mineral called aluminum tobamorite under stress, which acts like microscopic reinforcement bars. The more earthquakes hit it, the more this mineral network grows, a perfect example of ancient builders turning a material's weakness into its greatest strength. But the real stroke of genius was in their sourcing. They didn't just use any volcanic ash, they specifically harvested pozzolana from the Bay of Naples, where the unique combination of minerals and seawater created a chemical reaction modern scientists are still unraveling. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, it ironically preserved the recipe in Pompeii's ruins' concrete walls that survived both volcanic fury and centuries of earthquakes intact. Today, engineers are racing to replicate this formula for seawalls and nuclear waste containment, proving that the past might hold the key to a more resilient future. This revelation changes how we view ancient innovation. The Romans didn't have electron microscopes or chemical labs. They had keen eyes and patience. By watching how nature repaired cracks in volcanic rock, they harnessed a process we're only now beginning to understand. Their concrete whispers an important lesson. Sometimes the most advanced solutions aren't invented in laboratories, but discovered in the world around us. As modern researchers analyze amphitheaters that have shrugged off earthquakes for millennia, one thing becomes clear: we're not just studying history, we're learning from master engineers who turned natural forces into silent guardians of their creations. In the scorching deserts of Iran and Yemen, where modern construction seems impossible, ancient builders crafted homes that laughed in the face of earthquakes using nothing but mud, straw, and ingenuity. These unassuming adobe structures hide a brilliant secret. Their walls were designed to dance with tremors rather than resist them. By mixing straw or animal hair into sun-dried mud bricks, craftsmen created a material that behaved like nature's own fiberglass, flexible enough to sway during quakes, yet strong enough to hold together. The organic fibers acted like microscopic reinforcement bars, distributing stress evenly and preventing catastrophic cracks. Some of these buildings have sheltered families for over 700 years, surviving quakes that toppled contemporary concrete houses nearby. The magic wasn't just in the materials but in the shapes. Persian architects perfected the gone bad domed roofs that distributed seismic forces evenly in all directions, like an eggshell resisting pressure. Walk through the ancient city of Yazd, and you'll see entire neighborhoods of these domes still intact after centuries of tremors. Meanwhile, in Yemen's Shibam, often called the Manhattan of the desert, a towering mud brick skyscrapers rise up to 8 stories high. Their secret, deliberately uneven wall thicknesses that create natural harmonic dampening, causing different sections to move out of sync during quakes and cancel out destructive vibrations. Modern engineers confirmed these structures can withstand earthquakes up to 6.5 magnitude, outperforming many steel frame buildings in the same region. But the real stroke of genius was in the maintenance. Unlike modern buildings that degrade over time, these adobe structures grew stronger with each repair. When cracks appeared, locals would simply apply fresh mud plaster, a process that not only fixed damage but added new flexible layers. This living architecture philosophy meant buildings improved with age, absorbing the wisdom of every tremor they endured. Researchers at the University of Tehran discovered these repeated repairs created a memory effect, microscopic realignments that actually trained the structure to better handle future quakes. Now the geometric masters take center stage. From the honeycomb vaults of Iran's bazaars to the star-shaped foundations of Moroccan mosques, ancient mathematicians turned architecture into a seismic survival game. They discovered that certain shapes like hexagons or intersecting arches naturally redirected earthquake forces into harmless pathways. The Alhambra's palace in Spain demonstrates this perfectly. Its intricate muqarnas ceilings aren't just breathtaking art, they're earthquake dissipation systems, fracturing energy across thousands of tiny surfaces like a prism splitting light. These builders didn't just construct shelters, they engineered harmony between earth and architecture, proving that sometimes the simplest materials, shaped by the wisest geometries, create the most enduring legacies. The Hagia Sophia's dome doesn't just rest atop its walls, it floats on a hidden lattice of geometric genius. When Byzantine engineers rebuilt the structure after an earthquake in 558, they didn't simply reinforce it, they reimagined it. By piercing the dome's base with 40 arched windows, they created a honeycomb effect that turned solid stone into a dynamic shock absorber. Each window acted like a carefully placed perforation in a sheet of paper, allowing the dome to flex and breathe during tremors instead of cracking under pressure. Modern laser scans reveal an even more astonishing detail. The windows aren't spaced randomly but follow precise ratios that distribute stress along natural load paths, a concept physicists now call stress trajectory mapping. This wasn't just architecture, it was seismic alchemy, transforming rigid stone into something almost alive. What makes this honeycomb design so revolutionary is how it plays with perception. At first glance, the windows appear decorative, their golden light creating the illusion that the dome hovers weightlessly, but their true purpose reveals itself under duress. During the 1999 Izmit earthquake, sensors installed in the Hagia Sophia recorded something extraordinary. The dome's movement resembled a jellyfish pulsing in water, each undulation dissipating energy through its network of voids. The same principle appears in nature, from the hexagonal basalt columns of giants' causeway to the porous bones of bird structures that achieve remarkable strength through strategic emptiness. The real stroke of brilliance lies in the mortar. Byzantine builders mixed crushed ceramic tiles into their lime mortar, creating a material that hardened with a slight elasticity. Under magnification, it resembles a microscopic honeycomb, itself tiny air pockets allowing the binder to compress and rebound during quakes. This same technique appears in Turkey's lesser-known Bine-Berdyak cistern, where 336 columns support a ceiling that survived 17 centuries of tremors. Modern engineers have even borrowed this idea, developing voided concrete with embedded polystyrene spheres that mimic the Hagia Sophia's shock-absorbing cavities. Now consider the paradox at the heart of this design. The more openings architects added, the stronger the structure became. It's a lesson written in stone. Sometimes resilience comes not from adding mass, but from carving it away with intention. As we move from Turkey's geometric mastery to the Pacific coast, another civilization was discovering an equally counterintuitive truth. The path to stability might lie in deliberate instability. The ancient Moche people of Peru built their pyramids atop layers of loose, rounded stones, a foundation that should have spelled disaster, but instead became their salvation. The Parthenon's columns stand as silent witnesses to one of history's most counterintuitive survival strategies: deliberate weakness. Ancient Greek architects crafted certain columns with carefully calculated flaws, designing them to crumble in specific patterns during earthquakes. These sacrificial sections acted like ancient circuit breakers, absorbing seismic energy by failing in controlled ways that protected the temple's core structure. Modern engineers examining the ruins found telltale signs: columns with slightly reduced diameters at their midsections, or bases carved from softer stone than the rest. These weren't construction errors but seismic safety valves, creating what we'd now call plastic hinge points, where damage could occur without catastrophic collapse. What makes this approach so brilliant is its foresight. The Greeks recognized that trying to make every part equally strong would lead to unpredictable failure points. Instead, they directed the earthquake's fury toward predetermined weak spots, much like how modern skyscrapers use fuse joints that can be easily replaced after a quake. The Temple of Apollo at Bassi demonstrates this perfectly. Its unusual interior columns included grooves that encouraged cracking along non-critical lines, guiding fractures away from load-bearing areas. Contemporary computer models show these precisely weakened columns could reduce overall seismic forces by up to 30%, a staggering achievement for builders working 2.5 millennia before the Richter scale existed. The real stroke of genius was in the repairs. After earthquakes, Greek masons would simply replace the shattered column sections using standardized drum pieces, knowing the next tremor would likely sacrifice these same components again. This created a renewable safety system requiring minimal maintenance, an ancient precursor to today's replaceable energy dissipators in bridges and buildings. The concept lives on in unexpected places. Car manufacturers now use nearly identical crumple zone principles to protect passengers by designing vehicle frames that collapse in planned sequences during crashes. From calculated fragility, we turn to strategic mass. While the Greeks used controlled failure points, ancient Indian builders took the opposite approach. They built temples so heavy that earthquakes couldn't move them. The Brihadiswara temple in Thanjavur crowns its 200-foot tower with an 80-ton granite capstone. creating a center of gravity so low that the entire structure behaves like an inverted pendulum during quakes. This monolithic approach didn't just resist tremors, it literally ground them into submission, using sheer weight to stabilize the building through inertia. Modern engineers have measured the temple's natural frequency and found it perfectly mismatched with typical seismic waves in the region, causing destructive vibrations to cancel out. Two different cultures, two opposite solutions, one yielding gracefully, one standing immovable, both achieving the same remarkable result through brilliant observation of nature's laws. High in the Himalayas, Nepalese temples stand as silent sentinels against the mountain's fury, their sweeping roofs weighing more than entire modern houses. These aren't just decorative flourishes, they're seismic counterweights, engineered over centuries to transform what should be a liability into a life-saving asset. Each tiered roof layer, from the smallest shrine to the towering pagodas of Kathmandu's Durbar Square, acts like a pendulum, its sheer mass pulling the structure back to center during quakes. The heavier the roof, the more inertia it creates, resisting lateral movement like a ballast in a storm-tossed ship. But the real mastery lies in how these massive roofs connect to the walls below, not rigidly, but through intricate wooden joints that allow controlled swaying, creating what engineers now call a tuned mass damper system centuries before the term existed. Walk through the narrow streets of Bhaktapur after an earthquake, and you'll see the proof in the patterns. Modern concrete buildings cracked while ancient temples shrugged off the same tremors. The secret's in the layers. Unlike single heavy slabs that could topple a building, Nepalese roofs stack multiple smaller tiers, each absorbing and dispersing energy before it reaches the next. It's the architectural equivalent of catching a falling egg with a series of progressively softer cushions. Some temples, like the Nyatapola in Patton, take this to extraordinary levels, 5 ascending roofs that create a rhythmic distribution of weight, mathematically proportioned to cancel out seismic frequencies common in the region. But the genius doesn't stop at physics. These roofs are ecological masterpieces too. Their broad overhangs protect delicate brick walls from monsoon rains, while the air gaps between layers create natural ventilation, preventing moisture buildup that could weaken structures over time. Even the materials tell a story. The clay tiles gain strength through cycles of baking sun and freezing winters, becoming more resilient with age. Modern engineers have measured these roofs' performance during recent quakes and found they reduce building sway by up to 60% compared to flat-roofed structures of similar height. Now the narrative takes us from human-made solutions to nature's own blueprints. Just as Nepalese builders learned from the stability of mountain peaks, ancient engineers across Asia observed how bamboo groves withstood typhoons, their hollow stems bending gracefully while rigid trees snapped. This insight birthed another earthquake-defying innovation, one that turned buildings into artificial forests swaying with the Earth's tremors rather than fighting them. The transition from heavy roofs to flexible stems reveals a universal truth. Whether adding weight or embracing lightness, the ancients understood that harmony with natural forces wasn't just philosophy, it was the foundation of survival. Deep in the heart of South India, the stone forests of Hampi's temples whisper an ancient secret, pillars carved not as rigid columns, but as living trees frozen in granite. At first glance, these intricately fluted pillars with branching capitals seem purely decorative, but their true purpose reveals itself during earthquakes. Each tree pillar connects to its neighbors through stone branches that interlock overhead, creating a canopy-like network that disperses seismic energy, exactly like a grove of trees sharing the force of a storm. When tremors strike, these faux forests sway in unison, their curved bases rocking slightly like roots loosened in wind, while the branching tops prevent any single pillar from moving too far. Modern engineers analyzing the Vitala temple complex found this design reduces lateral forces by nearly 35% compared to straight columns, a revelation that's now inspiring seismic-resistant designs from Tokyo to San Francisco. The brilliance lies in the imperfections. Unlike the precise symmetry of Greek columns, these tree pillars were deliberately carved with slight asymmetries, thicker on one side or with unevenly spaced branches. This mimics nature's randomness, ensuring seismic waves don't create synchronized stresses that could topple the structure. Some pillars even feature hollow channels running vertically like sapwood, allowing them to flex minutely without cracking. During the 2017 earthquake that struck Karnataka, scientists recorded how these temple complexes behaved. The stone forest swayed at multiple frequencies simultaneously, effectively confusing the seismic waves and preventing resonance buildup. It's the same principle that helps real forests survive hurricanes' flexible individualism, creating collective strength. Now the scene shifts from organic mimicry to urban planning on an unprecedented scale. While Indian architects were perfecting their stone forests, an entire city in the Middle East was built as a seismic chessboard. The ruins of Bam in Iran reveal streets laid out in precise hexagonal grids, with each neighborhood acting as an independent shock-absorbing cell. Walls were constructed at slight angles rather than perfect right angles, creating thousands of micro-triangles throughout the city that redirected earthquake forces along harmless paths. When the 2003 earthquake struck, modern Bam collapsed, but the ancient citadel, built with these geometric defenses, suffered remarkably little damage. The city's planners understood something we're only now rediscovering. Earthquake resistance isn't just about individual buildings, but how structures work together as an interconnected system. This transition from singular innovations to whole city solutions marks a pivotal moment in our journey through ancient seismic wisdom. As we move from biomimicry to urban planning, a pattern emerges. Whether copying trees or engineering grids, the ancients consistently looked to nature not just for forms, but for fundamental principles of survival. Their legacy challenges us to think bigger, to see buildings not as isolated fortresses but as parts of living, adapting systems. The next technique will reveal how this philosophy reached its zenith in a place where architecture literally breathes. The wind-scoured cliffs of Cappadocia, where entire cities were carved not just to withstand earthquakes but to dance with them. Buried beneath the sands of modern-day Pakistan lies an urban masterpiece that defied earthquakes for over 4,000 years, Mohenjo-Daro's ghostly grid. This ancient Indus Valley metropolis wasn't just neatly organized. Its entire layout functioned like a seismic shock absorber. Wide streets running precisely north-south and east-west created natural fracture lines, allowing buildings to collapse outward rather than inward during quakes, a stark contrast to modern cities where narrow alleys become death traps when structures pancake. Archaeologists studying the ruins found something astonishing. Every brick in the city adhered to a standardized ratio of 4:2:1, meaning walls could interlock seamlessly when damaged, creating natural buttresses against further collapse. The real stroke of genius was in the gaps. Unlike later cities that packed buildings tightly for defense, Mohenjo-Daro's planners left strategic empty spaces between neighborhoods, not just for ventilation but as seismic buffers. When tremors struck, these open areas acted like expansion joints in modern bridges, allowing entire city blocks to shift slightly without domino effect collapses. Even the foundations told a story. Builders alternated layers of baked brick with reed mats, creating flexible, seismic isolation layers that absorbed vibrations centuries before the term existed. Modern simulations show this combination: grid layout, standardized materials, and intentional gaps could reduce earthquake damage by up to 40% compared to chaotic medieval city plans. But Mohenjo-Daro's architects didn't stop at street plans. They engineered their buildings as interconnected systems rather than isolated structures. Most homes shared walls with neighbors, creating continuous load-bearing networks that distributed seismic forces across multiple buildings. Courtyards were strategically placed to serve as collapse zones, while thick lower walls tapered upward to lower centers of gravity. The Great Bath's watertight construction used bitumen as a flexible sealant, a material still used in earthquake-resistant foundations today. This wasn't just urban planning, it was large-scale seismic engineering disguised as civic design. Now the spotlight shifts from urban geometry to molecular friction. While the Indus Valley optimized city layouts, another civilization was mastering earthquake resistance at the microscopic level through the alchemy of sand. The ancient Egyptians discovered that mixing just the right amount of desert sand into their mortar created a self-damping material. When tremors struck the pyramids, the quartz particles in the sand would generate tiny electrical charges through piezoelectric effects, subtly rearranging the crystalline structure to dissipate energy. Modern researchers recreating this mix found it behaves remarkably similar to today's smart concretes with embedded sensors, except the Egyptians stumbled upon it through trial and error 4,000 years earlier. The transition from city-scale defenses to material science reveals a universal truth about ancient earthquake wisdom. Resilience came from working with nature's forces at every scale, from urban grids to mineral grains. As we move from the Indus Valley's macro engineering to Egypt's nanoscale innovations, prepare to witness how friction, the very force most builders try to eliminate, became another civilization's secret weapon against the Earth's tremors. Beneath the soaring arches of ancient Persia's grandest palaces lay a humble secret, layer upon layer of carefully compacted sand. While modern engineers spend millions on rubber bearings and hydraulic dampers, Persian builders achieved similar earthquake protection with nothing more than desert sand and meticulous craftsmanship. They dug deep trenches beneath their structures, filling them with alternating layers of coarse and fine sand, creating what essentially functioned as a giant shock-absorbing mattress. When tremors struck, these granular layers would shift and flow, allowing the ground to move independently of the building above. It's the same principle that keeps a bowl of rice from spilling when you shake the table beneath it, controlled movement dissipating energy before it can cause damage. The sophistication of this system becomes clear when you examine the ruins of Pagoda, where 2.5 millennia of earthquakes have left neighboring rock formations fractured while the sand-cushioned structures remain eerily intact. Persian engineers didn't just dump sand randomly, they calibrated the grain size and compaction to match local seismic activity. In regions with frequent small tremors, they used finer sand that would flow easily, while areas prone to violent quakes got coarser, more stable layers. Some foundations even included thin sheets of lead between sand layers, adding just enough friction to prevent excessive sliding. Modern testing at the University of Tehran confirmed these ancient foundations could reduce seismic forces by up to 60%, rivaling today's high-tech base isolation systems. What's truly remarkable is how this technique spread across cultures. From the ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the fire temples of Central Asia, variations of the sand foundation appear wherever earthquakes threatened ancient structures. The builders understood something we often forget sometimes: the best defense isn't resistance, but intelligent surrender. By letting their buildings float on this artificial quicksand, they created structures that could ride out tremors like ships on a rolling sea. Now our journey takes us across the world to where another civilization was solving the same problem with mirror image brilliance. While Persians used loose sand to absorb shocks, the ancient Maya of Central America took the opposite approach. They built their pyramids atop rubber. Beneath the towering temples of Tikal and Kapan, archaeologists found layers of sapodilla tree sap mixed with crushed volcanic rock, creating natural rubber pads that flexed during earthquakes. These elastic foundations allowed the massive stone structures above to sway harmlessly, much like modern buildings mounted on synthetic rubber bearings. The Maya even engineered their rubber mixtures differently by region. Volcanic zones got more elastic compounds, while coastal areas used stiffer blends resistant to tropical moisture. Two ancient cultures, two continents apart, arriving at the same revolutionary idea. To survive the Earth's fury, sometimes you need to build on something that gives. The towering pyramids of Teotihuacan and Chichen Itza hold a secret in their sloping silhouettes. Those iconic stepped sides aren't just for grandeur or ceremonial stairways. Each degree of taper was carefully calculated to create a center of gravity so low that even the fiercest tremors couldn't topple them. Unlike modern skyscrapers that fight earthquakes with rigid steel frames, these Mesoamerican masterpieces embraced flexibility through geometry. The wider base acted like a wrestler bracing their stance, while the narrowing upper levels reduced weight where it mattered most. Archaeologists studying the Pyramid of the Sun found its precise 11-degree slope could dissipate seismic energy laterally, causing tremors to ripple outward like waves around a stone rather than crashing upward through the structure. But the genius didn't stop at angles. These builders incorporated hidden tension systems that would make any modern engineer nod in respect. Between the stone blocks, they inserted thin layers of crushed volcanic glass, a material that becomes slightly adhesive under pressure. During earthquakes, these layers would flex minutely, creating friction that dampened vibrations while preventing the stones from sliding out of alignment. It's the same principle behind today's seismic friction dampers, except the ancient version required no maintenance or replacement parts. At El Tajan's Niches Pyramid, this technique reaches its zenith. Over 360 precisely spaced recesses in the facade aren't just decorative. They create a grid of micro-buttresses that redistribute stress like a honeycomb during tremors. The real test came in 2017, when a magnitude 8.2 earthquake struck central Mexico. While contemporary buildings collapsed, these millennia-old pyramids barely shed a stone. Researchers analyzing the aftermath found something astonishing. The tapered design had created a natural frequency mismatch with the quake's vibrations, causing destructive waves to cancel each other out. Modern engineers are now applying this principle in Japan's newest skyscrapers, using tapered profiles tuned to specific seismic frequencies, proving that sometimes the most advanced solutions are written in ancient geometry. From stability through shape, we turn to strength through tension, an even more counterintuitive ancient innovation. While modern construction relies on compression to hold buildings upright, civilizations from the Andes to Anatolia discovered that strategic tension could make structures virtually earthquake-proof. The Incas wove natural fibers through their masonry like invisible sutures, creating walls that flexed without crumbling. In Turkey, builders stretched animal tendons across wooden frames to pre-stress buildings, giving them a natural rebound effect during tremors. These weren't just makeshift solutions, they were sophisticated systems harnessing nature's own engineering principles, long before the word tensile strength entered any textbook. On the windswept slopes of Easter Island, the massive moai statues stand as silent guardians over a seismic secret. Their survival owes as much to rope as it does to stone. While these towering figures appear rigid and immovable, their ancient creators engineered a brilliant stabilization system by wrapping thick ropes made from braided hibiscus fibers around the statues' bases. During earthquakes, these ropes would stretch and flex, allowing the multi-ton monoliths to sway gently like pendulums rather than toppling. Modern experiments by archaeologists at the University of California found that moai secured with replica fiber ropes could withstand simulated tremors up to 7.5 magnitude, 3 times stronger than what would topple an unsecured statue. The genius lies in the rope's dynamic tension. Unlike rigid supports that would snap under stress, these natural fibers acted like shock absorbers, tightening during lateral movements to pull the statue back to center. Islanders likely perfected this technique after observing how palm trees survived storms, their flexible trunks bending while the roots held firm. Some moai bases even show deliberate notches where ropes were anchored, proving this wasn't incidental but intentional seismic engineering. When Dutch explorers first arrived in 1722, they recorded seeing hundreds of standing statues despite the island's frequent quakes, a testament to rope technology modern engineers now call base isolation with natural fiber damping. Now shift your gaze from the Pacific to the Himalayas, where ancient builders discovered strength in deliberate imbalance. The wooden temples of Bhutan and Nepal stand defiantly on steep slopes, their asymmetrical designs looking precarious until an earthquake strikes. Unlike Western architecture that prizes perfect symmetry, these structures feature offset doors, uneven roof levels, and intentionally misaligned support beams. At first glance, these flaws seem like construction errors, but they're actually sophisticated seismic adaptations. The irregular shapes ensure that during tremors, different parts of the building move at different frequencies, preventing the synchronized shaking that collapses symmetrical structures. A 17th-century temple in Kathmandu demonstrates this perfectly. Its eastern wall leans inward slightly, while the western side bulges outward. When the 2015 earthquake devastated Nepal, this temple swayed like a dancer, its opposing imbalances canceling out destructive vibrations while nearby, perfect buildings crumbled. Modern computer modeling reveals why. The asymmetry created what engineers now term modal separation, essentially confusing the earthquake's energy by making different sections resist movement in different ways. It's the architectural equivalent of a boxer rolling with punches rather than standing rigid, another example of ancient builders mastering resilience through flexibility rather than brute strength. The transition from rope-bound stones to intentional asymmetry reveals a universal truth across ancient seismic wisdom. Sometimes the most stable solutions come from embracing movement rather than resisting it. As we move from the Himalayas to the deserts of North Africa, prepare to discover how another civilization turned one of architecture's greatest enemies, the shifting sand, into its most powerful ally against earthquakes. In the quiet lanes of Old Kyoto, traditional wooden houses stand askew, their walls meeting at odd angles and rooms arranged in what seems like haphazard confusion. This apparent chaos is actually a seismic masterstroke, an ancient Japanese technique that turns irregularity into resilience. Unlike modern cookie-cutter homes that can amplify earthquake vibrations through uniform shapes, these old houses use deliberately uneven layouts to disrupt destructive resonant frequencies. The staggered floor plans create what physicists call mode separation, ensuring different parts of the structure sway out of sync during tremors, canceling out vibrations rather than reinforcing them. Walk through a centuries-old Machiya townhouse and you'll feel it, floors that slope slightly, doorways offset by a few inches, even ceiling beams placed asymmetrically. These aren't construction flaws, they're earthquake dampers carved in wood. The magic lies in the imperfections. By avoiding parallel walls and right-angle corners, builders prevented the standing wave effect that can shake rigid boxes apart. Instead, seismic energy scatters unpredictably through the structure, dissipating harmlessly like ripples in a pond after skipping stones. Some homes even incorporated drunken pillars, central supports deliberately carved with subtle twists, causing the entire house to wobble erratically during quakes rather than vibrating in unison. Modern engineers testing these designs found they could reduce structural stress by up to 40% compared to symmetrical layouts. In the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, entire neighborhoods of contemporary homes collapsed while clusters of these irregular traditional houses survived with minimal damage, their beautiful chaos outsmarting the Earth's fury. Now consider how these builders harnessed an even more fundamental force, gravity itself. While modern skyscrapers rely on steel skeletons to resist lateral shaking, ancient architects from China to Peru discovered that sometimes the best defense was simply working with the relentless pull of the earth. The Horyuji Temple near Nara, built in the 7th century, demonstrates this brilliantly. Its 5-story pagoda appears impossibly tall for ancient engineering, yet it survived over 14 centuries of earthquakes. The secret, a massive central pillar hangs like a pendulum from the upper floors, its base suspended inches above the ground. When tremors strike, this weighted column sways counter to the building's movement, acting as a natural counterbalance that stabilizes the entire structure. It's not just a building, it's a colossal metronome tuned to the rhythms of the earth. This gravitational wisdom took different forms across cultures. In Italy, medieval builders piled heavy stone spires atop cathedrals not just for beauty, but because the weight compressed the walls below, creating friction that resisted seismic sliding. The Leaning Tower of Pisa's infamous tilt caused by unstable foundations ironically made it more earthquake-resistant, as the off-center mass dampened vibrations. Even humble Adobe homes in Yemen followed this principle, stacking heavy upper floors to lower the center of gravity, causing the structures to rock slightly during quakes before settling back like weighted dolls. These builders understood something we often forget. Fighting nature's forces requires not just strength, but strategic surrender, using gravity not as an opponent, but as the ultimate ally against the Earth's tremors. The transition from irregular layouts to gravitational mastery reveals a profound truth about ancient engineering. Whether through chaotic floor plans or perfectly balanced weights, these builders consistently worked with natural forces rather than against them. Their legacy whispers across centuries. Resilience isn't about defying the laws of physics, but about bending them to your purpose. As we move from gravity's embrace to the realm of living architecture, prepare to discover how some civilizations didn't just build earthquake-resistant structures, they grew them. Rising from the cobblestone streets of San Gimignano, Italy's medieval skyscrapers tell a tale of seismic defiance, not through rigidity, but through deliberate imbalance. These slender towers, some soaring over 200 feet, conceal a brilliant counterintuitive secret. Their heaviest stonework sits not at the base, but near the top. Like a tightrope walker balancing a pole, builders stacked massive bell chambers and fortified crowns high above the streets, creating a natural pendulum effect during earthquakes. When tremors struck, these weighted tops would sway slightly out of phase with the tower's movement, pulling the structure back to center like an invisible hand. Modern engineers analyzing the Torre Grossa discovered its upper third accounts for nearly 40% of the total weight, a precise ratio that computer models now confirm optimally counters lateral forces. The real stroke of genius was in the details. These medieval architects didn't just pile on weight randomly, they sculpted it. The tower's upper sections often featured hollow chambers or decorative arcades that reduced wind resistance while maintaining mass, preventing harmonic vibrations that could amplify quake damage. Some, like Pisa's infamous Leaning Tower, gained accidental seismic resistance through their tilts. The off-center gravity distribution actually dampened vibrations during historic quakes. This principle lives on today in Taipei 101 660-ton tuned mass damper, a high-tech descendant of those medieval stone counterweights swinging silently above Taiwanese skies. Now the scene shifts from stone counterbalances to living architecture, where flexibility becomes the ultimate shield. While Italian towers relied on mass to stabilize, traditional Balinese builders took the opposite approach, crafting homes that moved like grass in the wind. Their signature, limaçon roofs use layered thatch not just for weatherproofing, but as a seismic shock absorber. Each strand of dried grass flexes independently during tremors, dissipating energy across thousands of tiny movements, a concept engineers now call distributed damping. The entire roof structure connects to wooden pillars through loose fiber lashings rather than rigid joints, allowing the building to sway up to 12 inches without structural damage. This philosophy reaches its peak in Bali's ancient water temples, where entire complexes float atop networks of bamboo springs. During the 2018 Lombok earthquakes, modern concrete hotels collapsed while these flexible sanctuaries survived intact, their foundations behaving like shock absorbers. The lesson is clear: whether through the controlled sway of stone counterweights or the gentle flex of woven fibers, ancient builders understood that harmony with motion, not resistance to it, was the key to enduring the Earth's tremors. Rising like ancient sentinels from the Yemeni desert, the mud brick towers of Shibam defy both gravity and seismic logic. These soaring structures, some reaching 8 stories high, aren't held together by steel or concrete, but by thousands of woven bamboo strands embedded within their walls. Picture a basket made gigantic, its flexible latticework allowing the entire building to sway like a reed in the wind during earthquakes. The secret lies in the layering. Builders alternated thick mud bricks with crisscrossed bamboo mats, creating a composite material that's rigid enough to support towering heights yet flexible enough to dance with tremors. Modern engineers testing replicas found these walls could flex up to 6 inches without cracking, a stunning feat for buildings over 500 years old. The genius extends beyond materials to the very shape of these towers. Each floor is slightly narrower than the one below, creating a tapered profile that lowers the center of gravity while allowing wind and seismic forces to flow smoothly around the structure. Walk through the narrow alleys of Shibam after an earthquake, and you'll spot the proof while modern additions crumble. These ancient high-rises stand with only hairline cracks in their golden facades. Some towers even incorporate hollow interior columns filled with loose stones, acting as primitive but effective shock absorbers that rumble quietly during quakes, dissipating energy like a bag of marbles slowing a falling object. Now imagine turning from flexible walls to fluid foundations, where ancient engineers discovered that water itself could become an earthquake shield. In the floating temples of Southeast Asia, builders dug moats not just for defense but as seismic buffers. The principle is deceptively simple. By surrounding structures with water, they created a natural barrier that absorbed and redirected earthquake vibrations. The liquid acted like a shock-absorbing cushion, preventing seismic waves from transmitting their full force to the buildings. At Cambodia's Angkor Wat, engineers took this further, constructing an elaborate network of canals that transformed the entire temple complex into what essentially functioned as an island on a liquid foundation. The real innovation came in how they tuned these water defenses. By varying the moat widths and depths around different structures, builders could control how much energy each building absorbed. Wider moats for delicate towers, narrower ones for massive libraries. Modern seismologists studying the 2016 Myanmar earthquake made an astonishing discovery. Temples with intact ancient moat systems suffered 60% less damage than those where moats had been filled in for modern development. The water didn't just sit idly, it pulsed rhythmically during tremors, creating counterwaves that interfered destructively with incoming seismic waves. This liquid engineering reaches its pinnacle in Japan's Itsukushima Shrine, where the entire complex stands on wooden pillars submerged in tidal flats. During the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, sensors recorded how the moving water actually rocked the shrine in precise opposition to the seismic waves, cancelling out their force. From desert towers flexing on bamboo spines to temples floating on earthquake-dampening waters, ancient builders proved resilience could flow from the most unexpected elements. Beneath the sweeping roofs of China's Forbidden City lies a liquid secret, a network of water-filled trenches that turned palaces into islands of stability. These weren't just decorative moats, they functioned as early seismic dampers, absorbing and scattering earthquake vibrations before they could reach the imperial buildings. When tremors rippled through the ground, the water in these channels created a barrier effect, disrupting the coherence of seismic waves like a musician muting a vibrating string. Modern simulations at Tsinghua University revealed something astonishing. These moats could reduce ground shaking by up to 35%, essentially acting as ancient wave breakers for earthquakes. The sophistication went deeper than just digging ditches. Chinese engineers calibrated the width and depth of each moat based on the building. It protected wider channels for heavier structures, narrower ones for lighter pavilions. Some channels even featured stepped bottoms, creating turbulence that further dissipated energy. The Summer Palace near Beijing took this further, incorporating artificial lakes with precisely contoured shorelines that redirected seismic waves away from critical structures. During the 1679 San Pingu earthquake, contemporary records describe how buildings surrounded by these water defenses swayed gently while those outside the moat system collapsed violently. But the real stroke of genius was in the maintenance. Unlike modern seismic systems that degrade over time, these water defenses actually improved with age. As silt accumulated naturally in the moats, it created a viscous slurry that proved even more effective at absorbing high-frequency vibrations. The builders had inadvertently engineered a self-renewing damping system, one that required no human intervention to maintain its protective qualities. Today, engineers in Japan are experimenting with similar principles, surrounding skyscrapers with water-filled trenches to test if ancient hydro-engineering can complement modern seismic tech. From liquid barriers, we turn to stone puzzles. While Chinese builders used water to scatter seismic waves, the architects of ancient Byzantium employed geometry as their weapon against earthquakes. The next technique reveals how triangles and domes transformed rigid structures into flexible marvels, a proof that sometimes the sharpest angles create the softest landings. From the battlefields of Renaissance Europe comes an unexpected seismic innovation, the Star Fort. These geometric marvels, with their sharp angular bastions and zigzagging walls, were designed to deflect cannon fire, but nature revealed their hidden talent. They could dance with earthquakes too. The same pointed projections that frustrated invading armies also acted like seismic scissors, slicing incoming shockwaves into harmless fragments. At Italy's Pomonova fortress, the star's 5 arms create a natural dispersion pattern, channeling tremors outward along the angled walls rather than letting them converge destructively at the center. Modern engineers analyzing the 2016 Central Italy quakes found that star-shaped historic structures suffered 60% less damage than rectangular buildings of similar size, proof that military geometry doubled as accidental earthquake engineering. The secret lies in the angles. Each protruding bastion acts like a ship's prow cutting through seismic waves, while the recessed curtain walls between them create sheltered zones where energy dissipates. Fortress builders unknowingly perfected what physicists now call wave redirection architecture. Some forts, like Francis Vauban designed citadels, took this further by layering the star pattern smaller interior stars nested within larger ones, creating a fractal effect that scattered vibrations across multiple scales. The thick, sloping walls added another benefit. Their mass dampened high-frequency shaking, while the complex geometry handled low-frequency waves. This dual-action defense explains why many star forts survived centuries of warfare and quakes that leveled simpler structures around them. But the true seismic masterstroke was in the foundations. Builders often laid star forts atop networks of inclined wooden piles, not driven vertically but angled outward like the spokes of a wheel. During tremors, these splayed timbers would flex minutely, allowing the entire fortress to rock gently on its man-made root system. The Dutch even added hollow chambers beneath their water-bound forts, creating air pockets that acted like primitive base isolators. What began as a solution to marshy ground became an unintentional seismic shield, proving once again that ancient builders often solved multiple problems with single, elegant solutions. Now we shift from geometric deflection to microscopic grip. While star forts scattered seismic energy across their surfaces, another civilization was mastering the power of friction at the smallest scales. The ancient Greeks discovered that by mixing crushed pottery shards into their mortar, they created a rough, textured binder that allowed stone blocks to grip each other like sandpaper during quakes. This wasn't just sticky mortar, it was engineered roughness designed to maximize friction where it mattered most. At the Temple of Apollo in Corinth, archaeologists found walls where every joint contained this granular mix, letting stones shift slightly without sliding catastrophically. Modern tribologists, friction scientists testing replicas, found the Greek mixture increased seismic resistance by 40% compared to smooth mortars. A revelation that's now inspiring earthquake-resistant 3D printed concretes with intentionally rough surfaces. The transition from star-shaped dissipation to frictional mastery reveals a unifying truth. Whether working at the scale of fortress walls or mortar grains, ancient builders understood that controlling movement, not preventing it, was the key to survival. Their legacy whispers through the ages. Sometimes the most powerful force against nature's fury isn't brute strength, but strategic subtlety. The Inca stonemasons of Peru carved stone blocks with surfaces so precisely convex they seemed to defy gravity, yet this subtle curvature held the key to their seismic resilience. Each massive granite piece sat not flat against its neighbor, but with microscopic gaps that created a built-in shock absorption system. When earthquakes struck, these slightly rounded surfaces allowed the stones to rock and slide against one another, dissipating destructive energy through friction before gently settling back into alignment like a spoon finding its place in a drawer. Modern engineers call this limited displacement technology, but the Inca simply observed how riverbed pebbles naturally stabilized after landslides, their smooth, rounded shapes allowing them to shift then lock into secure positions. The sophistication becomes clear when you examine the ruins of Sacsayhuaman, where zigzagging walls have survived 500 years of tremors that flattened Spanish colonial buildings nearby. Laser scans reveal the stones aren't just convex, they're asymmetrically so, with curvature calibrated to the wall's angle and expected seismic forces. Lower courses feature more pronounced rounding to handle greater movement, while higher blocks are nearly flat for stability. Some interlocking joints even incorporate shallow depressions that act like ball bearings, guiding stones along specific sliding paths during quakes. During the 2007 Pisco earthquake, Cameras captured these walls in motion. The entire structure rippled like a flag in wind before snapping back to perfect alignment, leaving modern seismologists stunned. But the real stroke of genius was in the maintenance. Unlike modern buildings requiring complex repairs after quakes, these walls self-healed. The same sliding action that saved them during tremors also prevented cumulative damage. Each seismic event gently polished the contact surfaces, improving the fit over centuries. Today's engineers are replicating this principle with convex steel plates in bridge supports, proving ancient solutions can inspire cutting-edge safety systems. Now the focus shifts from sliding stones to suspended weights where another civilization harnessed gravity itself as a seismic shield. While the Inca let their walls dance, the builders of medieval Europe anchored their towers with colossal counterbalances. The next technique reveals how placing massive weights at precise heights could transform rigid structures into earthquake-defying pendulums, a concept so advanced it's now used in skyscrapers worldwide. High in the mountains of Armenia, ancient churches cling to cliff edges and perch on rocky outcrops, defying not just gravity but centuries of violent earthquakes. The secret to their survival lies beneath their graceful domes, walls so thick at the base they resemble fortress ramparts, tapering dramatically as they rise. This pyramid-like profile isn't just architectural flair, it's seismic genius. By concentrating up to 70% of the structure's weight in the lower third, Armenian builders created a center of gravity so low that even the fiercest tremors couldn't tip them over. The 7th century St. Hripsheim Church near Vagoshapat demonstrates this perfectly. Its lower walls stretch nearly 10 feet thick, narrowing to just 3 feet at the dome. When the 1988 Spitak earthquake leveled modern buildings across the region, this 1,400-year-old church emerged with only superficial cracks. The brilliance extends beyond simple mass distribution. These builders sculpted the weight with precision, using local volcanic tough stone, a material light enough to prevent excessive loading yet dense enough to provide stability. The walls aren't uniformly thick either. They're strategically reinforced at corners and load-bearing points, creating a network of seismic buttresses hidden within the masonry. Some churches, like the Jeghard Monastery, take this further by being partially carved into living rock, effectively merging man-made and natural foundations into an earthquake-resistant hybrid. Modern engineers analyzing these structures found their tapered design creates a natural frequency mismatch with typical seismic waves, essentially making the buildings invisible to certain destructive vibrations. But the real innovation was in the details. Armenian architects often incorporated hollow chambers within those massive lower walls, reducing dead weight while maintaining outward thickness. These voids acted like primitive shock absorbers, compressing slightly during quakes to dissipate energy. The dome's connection to the walls was equally ingenious, resting on a flexible wooden ring that allowed the roof to shift independently during tremors before recentering. This combination of brute strength and subtle flexibility explains how structures like the Zvartnots Cathedral ruins still stand after 12 centuries of tectonic abuse that should have reduced them to rubble. Now we descend from these mountain strongholds to discover how other civilizations turned nature's softest materials into seismic shields. While Armenian churches stood firm through sheer mass, ancient builders in seismic zones from Central Asia to the Americas discovered that sometimes the best defense came from materials that yielded gracefully. The next chapter reveals how woven fibers, elastic saps, and even loose earth became unexpected allies in humanity's timeless dance with the shifting earth, proving that resilience isn't always about standing rigid, but sometimes about bending wisely. Nestled along Portugal's rugged coastline, centuries-old stone houses hide a seismic secret in their walls' layers of cork oak bark. painstakingly sandwiched between granite blocks. This humble material, harvested from the country's vast forests, wasn't just insulation against Atlantic winds, it was nature's perfect earthquake dampener. When tremors rippled through these structures, the cork's cellular structure compressed like a sponge, absorbing kinetic energy that would otherwise fracture rigid masonry. The beauty of this system lies in its simplicity. As seismic waves traveled upward through the walls, each cork layer acted like a speed bump, slowing and scattering destructive vibrations before they could build to catastrophic levels. The effectiveness of this technique becomes clear in villages like Monsanto, where cork-lined homes have weathered centuries of earthquakes that toppled newer concrete buildings. Modern testing reveals why cork can compress up to 40% without permanent deformation, rebounding like a spring after each tremor. Builders often alternated thick cork sheets with thinner stone layers near the top of walls, creating a gradient that progressively softened seismic forces. Some houses even placed extra cork pads beneath lintels and corners, areas most prone to cracking. What seems like rudimentary construction was actually sophisticated energy management, a lesson today's engineers are revisiting with cork-infused concrete panels for seismic retrofits. But the real stroke of genius was in the material's dual purpose. Beyond earthquake protection, cork's natural resins made it insect-resistant, while its air-filled cells provided thermal regulation, keeping homes cool in summer and warm in winter. This multifunctional approach reflects a deeper wisdom. Ancient solutions often addressed multiple challenges simultaneously, something modern specialization sometimes overlooks. From organic dampers, we turn to geometric mastery. While Portuguese builders relied on cork's natural resilience, Islamic architects were engineering earthquake resistance through the perfect marriage of mathematics and masonry. The next technique reveals how interlocking star patterns and honeycomb vaults didn't just create breathtaking beauty, they formed nature's perfect shock-absorbing geometry. Rising like stone lighthouses across the Irish countryside, the round towers of medieval monasteries hold a deceptively simple secret: their perfect circular shape. These slender sentinels, some standing over 100 feet tall, lack any corners not just for aesthetic harmony, but as a brilliant seismic adaptation. Without sharp angles to concentrate stress, earthquake forces flow smoothly around the tower's circumference like water around a pebble. The cylindrical form naturally distributes laterals, shaking evenly in all directions, preventing the destructive focusing of energy that topples rectangular structures. Modern engineers analyzing the towers at Glendalough and Clondalkin found their circular walls could withstand nearly 40% more lateral force than square towers of equal height and materials, a revelation that's inspired contemporary cylindrical skyscrapers in earthquake zones. The brilliance extends beyond mere shape. These monastic builders employed a layered defense system within the smooth curves. The towers taper slightly as they rise, lowering the center of gravity while reducing wind resistance, a double protection against both seismic and storm forces. Their walls grow progressively thinner toward the top, from 4 feet thick at the base to just 2 feet beneath the conical cap, creating a natural harmonic dampening effect. Even the placement of windows and doors tells a seismic story. The few openings spiral upward in a staggered pattern, preventing straight-line weaknesses that could split the tower during shaking. When a rare tremor struck County Donegal in 1884, locals reported watching the round tower at Drumcliff sway gently, like a reed in the breeze, before settling perfectly upright, its curved silhouette having transformed destructive energy into graceful motion. Now consider how these builders took redundancy to astonishing levels. The towers weren't just single walls of stone, they concealed an ingenious nested design. Inner and outer stone shells were constructed independently with a gap between them, filled with rubble and mortar. During earthquakes, these layers could shift minutely against each other, dissipating energy through friction before the vibrations reached dangerous levels. The doorway, raised several feet above ground, wasn't merely for defense. It ensured the tower's weakest point wouldn't bear structural loads during tremors. Even the construction sequence served a purpose. Towers were built in vertical sections with intentional pauses between phases, allowing the mortar to fully cure and create natural seismic joints. This philosophy of layered protection reaches its peak in Ireland's most famous tower, the 112-foot marvel at Kilmacduagh. Its signature 7-degree lean, caused by uneven foundations, accidentally created an ideal seismic counterbalance. Modern laser scans reveal how the off-center mass dampens vibrations that would threaten a perfectly vertical tower. The builders unknowingly mimicked nature's wisdom. Just as trees develop reaction wood to stabilize against prevailing winds, their flawed tower adapted to its environment through subtle asymmetry. From purposeful circles to happy accidents, these stone giants teach us that true resilience often comes not from fighting nature's forces, but from embracing their rhythms. The transition from circular perfection to redundant design reveals a universal truth in ancient engineering: the best defenses come in layers. While Ireland's towers stood strong through shape alone, other civilizations took protection further by building backups into their very foundations. The next technique unveils how ancient Persia turned structural redundancy into an art form, crafting buildings with not one line of defense, but multiple interlocking systems, each ready to take the load when the earth begins to move. In the heart of Seoul, the grand palaces of Korea's Joseon dynasty stand as masterclasses in seismic foresight, their secret hidden in plain sight within the walls themselves. These sprawling complexes didn't rely on single barriers for protection, but on dual layers of masonry with a carefully measured gap between them. Imagine two independent walls standing shoulder to shoulder, separated by just enough space to let them move independently during an earthquake. When tremors struck, the outer wall would sway first, absorbing the initial shock, while the inner wall remained stable, a delayed reaction that prevented destructive vibrations from sinking up. The air gap acted like a shock absorber, dissipating energy as the walls rubbed against a middle layer of loose gravel and clay. Modern engineers examining Gyeongbokgung Palace discovered these double walls could reduce seismic forces by nearly 50% compared to solid construction, a revelation that's inspired today's mass-damped curtain walls in skyscrapers. The sophistication went beyond mere spacing. Korean builders tailored each wall's thickness to its role, the outer layer slightly thinner to flex more freely, the inner one denser to maintain structural integrity. Some corridors between the walls even incorporated vertical wooden posts that would tilt during quakes, creating friction to further slow the transfer of energy. During the 1718 earthquake that devastated much of Seoul, palace records describe how these buffer zones swallowed the dragon's fury, leaving the inner sanctums untouched while outer buildings suffered damage. The system was so effective that restorers today meticulously preserve the original gaps, knowing even a few inches difference could compromise centuries of proven seismic performance. Now shift your gaze from air gaps to stone interfaces, where another civilization harnessed friction itself as a stabilizing force. While Korean builders let their walls move independently, the ancient architects of Anatolia turned rubbing surfaces into an art form. In Turkey's Seljuk-era mosques, massive stone columns rest not directly on their bases, but on thin bronze plates lubricated with animal fat. During earthquakes, these plates allow the columns to slide minutely rather than crack under lateral forces. a concept identical to modern seismic isolation bearings. The genius was in the calibration. Builders adjusted the fat's viscosity based on local seismic activity, creating custom friction levels for each region. At the Sultan Hani Caravanserai, this system has kept towering arches intact through 8 centuries of tremors, their columns leaving polished trails on the bronze like a slow-motion dance recorded in metal. The transition from Korean buffer zones to Turkish sliding stones reveals a unifying truth, whether through air or friction. Ancient engineers understood that resilience often lies in the spaces between. Their legacy whispers across centuries. Sometimes the most powerful defense isn't in resisting movement, but in controlling its flow. Walking through the hypostyle halls of ancient Egyptian temples, your fingers might trace strange vertical grooves carved into towering stone pillars, lines so precise they seem purely decorative. But these channels held a seismic secret. Far from mere ornamentation, these grooves acted as engineered weak points, allowing the massive columns to flex slightly during earthquakes without shattering. Like score marks on a chocolate bar guiding where it breaks cleanly, these carefully placed channels directed stress along predetermined paths, preventing random cracks that could topple entire structures. At Karnak Temple, where some columns stand 70 feet tall, these grooves permitted just enough movement to dissipate destructive energy, sometimes less than an inch, but that tiny give made all the difference between survival and collapse. The sophistication becomes clear when you examine the patterns. These weren't random carvings. Egyptian architects varied the groove depth and spacing based on a pillar's position and load-bearing role. Columns near the center of halls, bearing the most weight, featured deeper channels to handle greater stress, while perimeter pillars had shallower scoring. Some grooves even spiraled slightly, creating a helical weakness that allowed torsional movement during complex seismic waves. Modern engineers testing replicas found these grooved pillars could withstand 30% more lateral force than smooth columns of identical size, a revelation that's now inspiring pre-fractured concrete designs in earthquake-prone regions. But the real stroke of genius was in the maintenance. After earthquakes, priests would rub a mixture of Nile clay and gypsum into the groove's micro-fractures. As the paste hardened, it didn't just repair damage, it subtly altered the pillar's flexibility, tuning it like a musical instrument to better handle future tremors. This living approach to architecture meant the temples grew more resilient with each quake, their pillars essentially training themselves through experience. The Temple of Edfu's records describe this process as feeding the bones of the earth, a poetic nod to structures that seemed almost alive in their ability to adapt. Now imagine shifting from man-made grooves to nature's own shock absorbers. While Egyptian pillars flexed through engineered channels, the ancient city of Antigua, Guatemala took a radically different approach. It literally floated its buildings atop a natural dampening system. After devastating quakes in the 18th century, builders layered the city's foundations with volcanic pumice, a lightweight stone so porous it behaves like a geological sponge. This cushion of compressed air pockets absorbed seismic waves before they could reach the structures above, transforming the entire city into what engineers now recognize as a primitive base isolation system. The ruins of convents and churches that survived subsequent quakes stand testament to an ingenious truth. Sometimes the best defense against the Earth's fury lies not in fighting its power, but in laying down a buffer that lets human creations ride out the storm. The legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon may only survive in ancient texts, but their most revolutionary feature wasn't the lush vegetation. It was the walkways that floated between terraces like suspended bridges. Historical accounts describe these elevated pathways swaying gently during earthquakes, their flexible reed and bitumen construction, allowing them to dance with tremors rather than resist them. Picture a modern suspension bridge, but scaled down and woven from natural materials. Each walkway acted like a seismic pendulum, its slight movements dissipating destructive energy before it could reach the garden's delicate structures. Archaeologists studying similar Babylonian ruins found evidence of this principle: terraces connected by loose, fiber-lashed walkways that could shift up to a foot during quakes without breaking. What made this system so groundbreaking was its layered approach to flexibility. The walkways weren't just hung from ropes, they rested on wooden frames with tapered joints that tightened under pressure, creating a self-adjusting system. When tremors struck, the gaps between planks allowed individual boards to move independently, preventing the synchronization of vibrations that topples rigid structures. Some accounts even mention counterweights hidden within hollow railings, balancing the walkways like acrobats on a tightrope. Modern engineers have recreated scaled models of these designs, finding they could reduce seismic stress by nearly 40% compared to fixed walkways, a revelation that's inspiring earthquake-resistant pedestrian bridges in Japan and California today. But the garden's true lesson lies deeper than engineering. These suspended paths symbolize a philosophy we're only now rediscovering. Infrastructure shouldn't just endure nature's forces, but harmonize with them. Like willow branches bending in a storm, the Babylonians built their wonders to move, not fight. This wisdom echoes through the centuries, from the swaying pagodas of Kyoto to the rolling foundations of Persian palaces. Their legacy challenges our modern obsession with rigid permanence, reminding us that resilience often wears the guise of flexibility. As we reflect on these 25 techniques, a unifying truth emerges. Whether through Inca stone puzzles or Babylonian reed walkways, ancient builders consistently observed nature's solutions before imposing their own. They didn't have seismographs or supercomputers, just generations of trial and error encoded in mortar and stone. Today, as engineers mine these forgotten wisdoms for modern applications, we're witnessing something extraordinary. The past isn't just informing the future, it's revolutionizing it. The next time you walk through a city that survived centuries of earthquakes, look closer. The real marvel isn't that these structures still stand, but that they've been whispering their secrets all along, waiting for us to listen. Modern skyscrapers in Tokyo and San Francisco now stand on rubber bearings that would look familiar to Japan's ancient pagoda builders. Just swap out lacquered wood for synthetic polymers. This isn't nostalgia, it's a seismic revolution. Engineers at the University of California recently tested a hybrid system combining 7th-century wooden joinery with carbon fiber, resulting in a framework that outperformed conventional steel frames by 30% in simulated quakes. The breakthrough came not from advanced mathematics, but from studying how the Horyuji Temple's floating central pillar had survived 1,400 years of tremors. What's fascinating is how these rediscoveries are rewriting engineering playbooks. The Roman recipe for self-healing concrete, long dismissed as legend until mighty researchers analyzed samples from Trajan's market, now inspires living concrete infused with limestone-producing bacteria. Similarly, the Inca's polygonal stonework, once considered primitive for lacking mortar, has become a blueprint for 3D printed building blocks that interlock with seismic absorbing precision. At ETH Zurich, architects are using robotic arms to carve stones with the same subtle convex surfaces found at Machu Picchu, proving these shapes distribute stress exactly as modern finite element models predict. The real shift goes beyond materials, it's a philosophical homecoming. Ancient builders viewed earthquakes as conversations with the earth, not battles against it. This mindset is transforming modern design. Peru's newest earthquake drills simulate how Inca walls would behave, teaching engineers to prioritize controlled movement over rigid resistance. In Italy, restoration teams now replicate the imperfect pillars of Greek temples, carving strategic weak points that direct seismic damage away from critical supports. Even disaster response has changed. After the 2015 Nepal earthquake, rebuilders consulted centuries-old mandala diagrams to reconstruct temples with their original seismic dampening asymmetries. Perhaps the most profound lesson lies in sustainability. These ancient techniques required no synthetic materials or energy-intensive processes, just keen observation of nature's patterns. A single example says it all. While modern seismic retrofits often involve tearing open walls to insert steel beams, Japanese carpenters can reinforce a centuries-old pagoda using traditional methods in days, with nothing but wood and hand tools. As climate change demands greener solutions, the past offers a surprising roadmap, one where resilience comes not from overpowering nature, but from understanding its rhythms. The next frontier, merging these rediscoveries with cutting-edge tech. Stanford engineers are developing AI that analyzes thousands of ancient structures to identify overlooked seismic principles. In Turkey, a smart mortar embedded with sensors mimics the Byzantine formula that made Hagia Sophia's dome self-repairing. Even space agencies are taking note. NASA, a lunar habitat designs incorporate Pueblo Indian cliff dwelling techniques for stabilizing structures in seismically active moon regions. This cross-pollination of old and new proves a powerful truth. When it comes to outsmarting earthquakes, sometimes the most innovative path forward begins by looking back. From Japan's floating pagodas to the Inca's puzzle-like walls, these 25 forgotten techniques reveal something profound about human ingenuity. Ancient builders didn't just construct buildings, they choreographed a silent dance between stone and earth, wood and wind. Their structures weren't designed to dominate nature, but to converse with it, bending without breaking, swaying without falling. This wasn't just engineering, it was a philosophy carved in mortar and timber, one that modern architects are finally beginning to relearn. Take a moment to consider what these techniques share. Whether it's the lead plates beneath Turkish palaces or the bamboo fibers woven through Yemeni towers, every solution embraced movement over rigidity. The builders understood something we often forget. Earthquakes aren't attacks to withstand, but rhythms to join. Their wisdom whispers through the ages, in the way a Persian sand foundation flows like water, or how a Japanese pagoda's loose pillar swings like a pendulum. These weren't accidents, but calculated acts of humility before nature's power. The real magic lies in how these methods crossed continents and cultures without satellites or blueprints. From the Himalayas to the Andes, builders arrived at eerily similar solutions: tapered walls, flexible joints, strategic weaknesses, proving that careful observation of the natural world leads to universal truths. A Moche pyramid's rolling stones and a Korean palace's air gaps achieved the same goal through different means, letting the earth move while the structure adapts. Today, as concrete jungles sprawl across fault lines, these ancient lessons feel more urgent than ever. Engineers in Chile now study Inca stonework to design hospitals that can ride out megathrust quakes. Japanese carpenters preserve thousand-year-old wood joinery techniques that outperform modern steel frames. Even NASA looks to Pueblo cliff dwellings for inspiration in building lunar habitats on seismically active moons. The past isn't just history, it's a living laboratory, offering solutions we're only now smart enough to appreciate. So the next time you walk past an ancient temple or a medieval tower, look closer. Those weathered stones hold secrets that could save lives. The irony is beautiful. In our race toward the future, the answers we seek might lie in the very structures we once called primitive. Their resilience wasn't forged in labs or computers, but in patience, observation, and a profound respect for the forces that shape our world. If this journey through forgotten wisdom has sparked your curiosity, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's hidden innovations. Drop a comment below. Have you ever noticed an ancient building that seemed to defy time and tremors? Until our next adventure, keep looking beyond the surface. The past has more to teach us than we ever